Right, so that's the March Apple event. It's done, and we've watched it. I'm going to have a glass of whiskey because this is going to be a bit of a talking episode with you guys. I need a whiskey glass, actually. Here we go. Bowmore 12. This is a lovely whiskey. Make sure you pour yourself one and have a glass of whiskey with me while we talk about the event. Lovely stuff. Let's do a bit of a roundup, and I'll talk about the bits as we go through them. The first thing that they showed was just Apple TV nonsense. Some of it looks okay, but you know what? There isn't really a show on Apple TV Plus that I like. C was okay, but to be honest, the rest, not so much. But then we got on to the good stuff. Ish. The first real thing they spoke about was a brand new collar for the iPhone 13 Pro range, which was green! And don't get me wrong, I think that's amazing. Bit of an underwhelming announcement to start with, but it's green, and I love green. Anything green is my favourite colour, so I'm super happy about that. And then they went on to talk about the iPhone SE. Now, I had some expectations for this that I guess we're probably a bit lofty. We've had this same design now for many, many years and years and years, going right back to the iPhone 6. The same design. Okay, yes, some of the tech has increased, the processor, the camera. That's pretty much it. But ultimately, it's the same bloody phone as the iPhone 6, so I kind of expected something a little bit more from Apple. But they've included the A15 Bionic chip inside the SE, which is a good thing. That's really good. It is going to be a really powerful phone, and you can't argue that aspect of it. It's going to be an extremely good phone. And $429? I'm in two minds. It's an okay price, but would I expect a bit more? Yes. You compare that to some competitors like Xiaomi, and they're putting things like edge-to-edge OLED displays in their phones that are under 100 quid. It did have 5G, actually. That's one thing they have implemented, which was good, because 5G is ever expanding. It's getting more supported in more places. I still get none of it in the middle of nowhere like I am right now, but the moment I go into any form of city, I genuinely do get 5G. So that's really, really good. For me, in my opinion, the SE is still a bit overpriced. Yes, it's Apple, you're buying into the Apple ecosystem, and yes, it gives people the opportunity to have a phone or an iPhone who might not be that bothered about what they're buying, but I still think that technology-wise, it's a little bit overpriced. But someone will be happy, I'm sure. Next up, they announced a new iPad Air. Now, this is where it piqued my interest because I love the iPad Air. I think it's a brilliant product. The iPad has always been my favourite tablet. I just love it as a device, even from the very, very first one. And now they've put the M1 chip in the iPad Air. That's insane. That is so good. But, and here's the big but, it's going to be crippled by the fact it's still running iPad OS. Now, let me give you some context to what I've just said. I run my entire studio over there on a Mac Mini M1. A Mac Mini M1. All of my videos that you see are recorded in 4K 30 frames per second, and quite often there's over an hour of footage that computer churns through, and it does remarkably well, faster than anything I've ever had before. I cannot stress enough how much I love the M1 chip. It completely revolutionized desktop computing. I think it's incredible. Putting it in the iPad is all very well and good, and I would love to be able to jump onto my iPad and continue doing some edits, but the big problem is it's not Mac OS, so you haven't got the ability to do half the things you would do. Even run things like Final Cut Pro. Now the iPad Air could very well be capable of running Final Cut Pro, but it can't, because it's running iPad OS, and that's a big shame. Don't get me wrong, I'm not all negative about this. I think it's incredible, and there are apps and ways to do some really advanced editing and awesome stuff with the iPad. I just feel that either one of two things needs to happen. They allow some form of Mac OS, maybe a slightly slimmed down version of it, onto an iPad. or they bring out iPad versions of their Pro apps. Bring out a Logic for iPad, bring out a Final Cut Pro for iPad, because that's the only way I'm going to make full use of this M1 chip. They also added a few other little bits as well. They added 5G and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera on the front. Great for video calls, great for center stage. So overall, pretty good. A really nice upgrade to the iPad Air system, and it's only $599 as well. By the way, I'm not sure what the UK prices are, because right now I'm literally filming this a couple of seconds after it's finished, and they haven't released the UK prices yet. But $599 for that level of power, I can't argue. I just hope, I just pray that eventually they realise its full power and potential. Next up, they announced something that is just insane, the M1 Ultra chip. Now, we've already got 3 chips within that lineup, so why do you need the 4th one, I don't know. But this, for all intents and purposes, is 2 M1 Max chips welded together in a simple, descriptive way. But it's not quite that simple. But ultimately, this thing looks insane. I've got some of the specs here. It's got a 20-core CPU with 16 high-performance cores and 4 high-efficiency cores. It's got a 64-core GPU. What's this thing designed for? Running the Matrix? Now, one of the things I was really hoping for was a release of a Mac Mini with a faster processor other than the M1s, maybe the M1 Max. That would have been nice. But what they introduced was something I guess I expected, but also didn't expect. They next announced the Mac Studio, which I thought was going to be the replacement for the Mac Pro, but you'll see why that might be wrong in a minute. But this thing is an utter powerhouse, despite the fact it's not really that much bigger than a Mac Mini. It's just ridiculous with that M1 Ultra chip inside it. And the input and output as well is incredible. It's got 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, one 10 gigabit Ethernet port, 2 USB ports, a HDMI port, a Pro Audio port on the back, and on the front it's got 2 USB-C and an SD card reader on the front of the machine. It's only taken many years for Apple to realise that they need to put an SD card on the front of the machines. How frustrating has it been fumbling around the back of the machines to put SD cards in? Yes, I could use an SD card reader, which I've done. I've used the Satechi Mac Mini hub on mine, which gives me the ability to put the SD card in the front. But now this is built into the Mac Studio. I'm sorry, Satechi, you're probably going to lose a couple of sales there. I cannot wait. Sort of. That was until I found out the price. This thing is $3,999. So, if anyone would like to buy signed pictures of my feet, send me a comment below. Or anything else. Would you like to buy a book? Or my shirt? Or what's left of my hair? But they did draw to an interesting comparison. They did say that it will actually use 1,000 kilowatts of energy less than a desktop, like a high-end desktop, per year, which is really interesting, especially given the fact that electricity prices are skyrocketing, and that sort of thing is going to be in the forefront of people's minds. I mean, with the Mac Mini M1, it's super power efficient, and I love it for that. But the fact that this is going to use so much less than a sort of competitive desktop PC, that's good. To go with the Mac Studio, they're releasing something brand new, the Studio Display. And this comes with some very interesting things. First of all, it's 27-inch and the bezels are still massive. I mean, come on. Fine. I know it sounds like I've got a bit of a vendetta against bezels, and that's because I have. I'm sick of bezels, and Apple, I know, could do so much better than these horrible big bezels they put in absolutely everything. Oh well. Supposedly it's got the best speakers that are in any Apple desktop they've ever built. It's got 6 in there, and supposedly it supports spatial audio as well, which I'm quite excited to see because I do like spatial audio. The weirdest thing about this display is that it's got an A13 Bionic chip in it though, which is crazy. Supposedly it also gives it the ability to listen for Siri, and also that's what essentially powers the spatial audio, so I'm quite excited to see this in action. It's only 5K, which surprised me. I kind of thought maybe they'd run an 8K display with this one, given the fact that that is the forefront of that technology, and it probably will make its way down to the consumers in the next few years. But 5K is still really good. Price-wise, we're $1,600, which is a lot. That was everything they announced at the event. Overall, a pretty solid event and some amazing advancements, which I'll talk more about in just a few seconds. But there was one more thing that I picked up on. Right at the very end, they mentioned they were going to save talking about the Mac Pro for another day. What on earth is that going to look like when you've got the Mac Studio, which is so powerful it could probably tear a hole into the next dimension? What on earth are they going to do with the next one? What the hell would that cost? But overall, I'm super excited for a few of the products. The iPad Air is going to be a great addition. I can't believe they put the M1 chip in the iPad Air. I think that's an amazing addition. I'm just hoping that maybe during the summer, they reveal a new iPad OS that has some greater Pro functionality. That's all I'm after. But other than that, I think it's a fantastic product, great value, great processor, and I love the new additions they've made to that lineup. This Mac Studio, though, I cannot wait. I think it's incredible. I'll never be able to afford one, of course not, but I think the power is unbelievable. Just look at the inside of this thing. Those 2 massive turbine fans pulling the heat out of that thing. This thing is gonna be so capable, it's unbelievable. But looking at those fans, they did comment that you shouldn't be able to hear it. It's supposed to be inaudible for most situations. I find that hard to believe, but then again, I've never heard my Mac Mini at all, and that runs some incredibly intense tasks. I guess in conclusion, I would say that event was a win. Biggest highlight, absolutely the Mac Studio. Biggest disappointment, well, that's going to be the iPhone SE. Very disappointed that that is still the same. Very disappointed indeed. But as an overall event, I think it's pretty good, and it really paves the way for the next generation of Apple products with the M1 Ultra, and I cannot wait to see what comes about this summer when they talk about the new software that's going to be coming out for iPads and Mac. And that's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed this Talking Head episode, having a nice glass of whiskey with me. But that's all from me. If you did enjoy today's episode, Talking Head, talking with you, chilling out, having a whiskey, talking about the event, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. But if you've got any opinions on the Apple event, talk to us, drop your comments below. I want to hear what you think. Let's have a good chinwag. I'll be awake for a little bit longer so we can all have a chat in the comments. And I'll see you back for another episode soon. Mm. 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 Mm.